This is the Literary License Podcast with your hosts, Vicky Ray, John Wilson, and Keith Shorgo. Discussing book to screen and everything in between. Coming at you from the UK and USA.
They keep it real. It's knocking at our doors, turning all our children into hooligans and whores, voraciously devouring the way things are today, savagely deflowering the good of USA. Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, oh so mad. See the kids, who is just kids. Yes, their heads are on the chopping block.
And someone's got to dare to take a stand. Panic not anymore. It could be your son or daughter with a deadly stick of reefer in the hand. Straight for Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, oh so bad.
Stealthy as a socialist, it slithers up our shores, turning all our children into hooligans and whores.
This smoking bowl of evil bears the choking stench of sin.
It burrows like a weevil under tender Christian skin. Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, oh so mad. Hold the wool, around your eyes.
We're in need of righteous soldiers, for this very wonder has to be destroyed.
Like the urge of the scourge, it's destructive but seductive.
So some drastic measures have to be employed. Put an end to
Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, oh so mad.
deadly as the Democrats that empty out our stores, turning all our children into hooligans and whores.
Teenagers across the land are laced and oversexed. If you
Fail to draw the line, your babies will be next.
Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, Reefer Madness, oh so mad.
Like the children,
Reefer Madness,
fight the menace,
Reefer Madness,
kill the devil,
Reefer Madness,
save the country.
Reefer Madness,
Hello, welcome to the Literary License Podcast, and today we have our regular co-host, which is John Wilson.
Hello.
And Vicky Ray.
Hi, guys.
And today we're dealing with the 1936 exploitation film Reefer Madness and the remake coming out in 2004 of Reefer Madness The Musical. How we're going to start out today is Reefer Madness, which is basically an exploitation film that was done in 1936 by a church group. Then basically what happened was it was bought by a salacious film distributor who put in some racy sexual overtones into the film and released it in 1938 on the exploitation circuit of the 1930s and 1940s. In the 1930s and 1940s, exploitation circuit basically had films such as Sex Madness, about the ills of gonorrhea, and Child Bride, which, from one review, basically after they saw it, made them want to laugh, cry, and want to take a hot shower afterwards, because it's basically about a 13-year-old being married to a 40-year-old man. And it actually included salacious scenes of the 13-year-old naked and swimming. And that time, I guess you can say that the film is probably nowadays is now banned. We also had another film called Mom and Dad, which basically talked about clean sex living. And She Should Have Said No, about a woman who turned to prostitution. So to start off, before we go any further with our Reefer Madness 1936 film, what we're going to talk about now is our most memorable drug experience. And John, how would you like to start this out?
Drugs? Drugs are bad for people. I would never do something like
just
that.
Say no, John. Just say no. No, I guess one of the ones that just comes to mind is when I went to actually Mexico, and we were just laying on the beach, and this guy comes up with a box, and it had all these pipes in it, and jokingly, my friend, my ex had said, "Oh, well, what am I supposed to do with that?" And all of a sudden, the guy runs away and comes back 10 minutes later, and he's pointing at the box, and we're all just like, "What is this? What is this problem?" And all of a sudden, we look down, there's like a bag of a pot in the box, and we're laughing. We're like, well, when in Rome.
Absolutely.
And what about yourself, Victoria?
Oh, I was just sitting here talking to John about it. It's going to sound like we're beating on Mexico. I have plenty of drug stories. Most people know me. Just like, especially if you went to high school or to college, there's always a drug story. But when I was in Mexico last week, I usually go and I go to the pharmacies to get amoxicillin and stuff like that, because you know how hard it is to get drugs there. And then I found out, they had other stuff there. It's like your typical tramadol or painkillers or whatever that you can't get here, that you have to beg your doctors for now, clearly. And it was funny because they were selling like Mexican 4 bars of Xanax, and I was going to buy the last bottle. And this pharmacist didn't have enough for both me and my friend because, she didn't want to buy the ones in the box, and I got the bottle. So anyway, this guy runs out of his pharmacy, leaves us there. He's lucky we're honest and nice people. Leaves us there totally, completely, and runs down to wherever he went, goes buys another bottle of the Xanax and brings it back. And, we're sitting here, he's all sweating and everything, so we pay him and everything. But in the meanwhile, while he was gone, a couple of the native Mexican cartel comes up to me basically, and they're pulling open their pockets and showing me all their pharmaceuticals because they saw an American standing in front of a pharmacy, so I probably looked like a typical mark. But it was just kind of funny because, it's just like everybody was offering me drugs the whole time I was down there. Even when I was shopping, they were offering me drugs. So, I guess I got one of those faces. But that was just recent.
Well, my most memorable drug experience is that I was with my friend Shannon, my ex Brian, and Carmelita, and in Tulsa, Oklahoma during uni years. So Tulsa, Oklahoma is basically a 1920s Art Deco. Was built during the boom of the oil boom of the 20s in America. And I, at that time, lived in this 1920s hotel or apartment complex called the Ambassador Hotel. Which that was cool. Very old, very nice. And, we had an elevator woman and the such. And basically, me and Carmelita and Shannon and Brian decided to drop some acid. Well, we dropped acid and we walked around Tulsa in our own little trippy world. And,
oh, my God. Not Tulsa.
And then basically I returned back to home, and in the evenings of the graveyard shift, there's these 2 old ladies, and they used to make coffee for me. And she always had it percolated coffee, and she always had added special cinnamon and nutmeg to it, which made it even more special. So I'm sitting there, and she goes, and I had my boom box at the time, and I was really getting into Kate Bush's Hounds of Love album. Well, I decided to play this for them. And I have to say, they acted really well. I'm sure they knew what was going on. But I was playing Hounds of Love, and there's this great big marble table, and I was watching the marble and during my acid stupor make all these wonderful, designs and stuff to Kate Bush's Hounds of Love. And then when we got to the second side of the table, when we do Waking the Witch and it all gets quite evil, I had to say that things didn't go as planned, and they did very well keeping me calmed down. So that's probably my most memorable drug experience.
Well, acid in the 80s, especially in college, it was definitely one of my drugs of choices back then.
Yeah.
Very open mind.
It's always good to reflect back to your parents' generation and bring it into your own.
Incorporate it. My poor kids. They'd be so embarrassed. I try to embarrass them with my stories.
So to take it another step further, John, why don't we talk about forming the plot and give us a brief history of Reefer Madness in 1936?
Yeah, so as you had mentioned, originally this was financed by a church group under a title, Tell Your Children. The film's intent was to show parents the morality tale of attempting to teach them about the dangers of cannabis. However, as soon as the film was shot, it was produced by a producer, Dwayne Esper, who recut the film for distribution. The film was rediscovered in the 70s and gained new life as an unintentional satire among advocates of cannabis policy reform. Critics, however, had panned it as one of the worst films that was ever made. And it's actually up on YouTube. So if anyone actually wants to watch the original, please do. So that way you kind of actually watch that and then, listen to us talk about it, because it'll give a whole new context to what we're trying to tell you.
You've got to watch it.
I think another thing to add also is that in 1936, it was actually produced by a church group, and there's a lot of exploitation films that didn't actually have to fall underneath the Hays Code, so they could go a bit wild as they want to. And basically, they were trying to protect people from the 1920s. Was an exceptional time in America where excess was the main thing. And we're talking about excess. We're talking about, at that time, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it.
Yeah.
Coke. Have a Coke and a smile gives a whole new meaning now.
I know.
Puts a little pep in your step.
Yeah, put a little zinc in your pencil. Yeah.
But also what was going on at that time is the hemp industry was starting to grow. And there was hemp clothing, hemp cloth, and hemp paper. And because of Rudolph Hearst and Mr. DuPont, who was coming out with nylon at that time, they got together with DuPont's brother-in-law, who was then the treasurer of this state, and decided to outlaw marijuana. And to doing this, outlawing marijuana, basically would help, the paper industry keep growing, help nylon reach fruition, and would not help, basically would help stop their shares plummeting. And also it became law. So at that time, there was quite a few marijuana exploitation films, but Reefer Madness is probably the one that's always going to be remembered.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess that there was a lot of racism and criminalization of weed, too. It was back then, it was the little-known drug that they associated with minorities at the time, when it was already starting, like with the blacks and the Hispanics as well.
Well, there was there were big stars who actually were big jazz stars around this time.
Right.
Stars like Cab Calloway, Louis Armstrong. They were all singing songs about marijuana. So that also, and jazz was the evil music to turn our youth.
Yeah. There's also and then in 1929. Harry Anslinger was put in charge with the Department of Prohibition in Washington. So when alcohol became legalized, he needed a new mission in order to kind of have a job. So he at first was very much in support of marijuana. Then all of a sudden he changed his stance because he had lost the fight sort of with the neighbors, like neighboring, taking control, like the criminals started taking control of alcohol and sort of distributing it. He couldn't control that anymore. And then that became legalized. And so his new mission was, let's go after people who smoke pot.
I know it. I mean, yeah, really. There was also Andrew Mellon, who was helped with Harry Anslinger to go after all the DuPonts really led the charge, though. All those rich companies, DuPont's, Hearst, there was another big family. The newspaper industry was totally leading the charge against marijuana at the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, boy, what a bad rap it got. And they're saying that being cocaine and heroin is not near as bad as marijuana. And it's like, whoa,
Yeah, they were trying to get a lot of doctors to come in and sort of have this hard stance on what, the drugs, what marijuana does to the system. But a lot of them were like, we've been using it for years. There's nothing wrong with it. And so they had to find that one doctor who would say, oh, yeah, it's horrible.
Didn't you like how the people deteriorated through the movie, though? I mean,
oh, yeah.
Their eyes they're starting to be hollow sockets.
They started looking like zombies. They're just,
They started freaking out and going nuts and, just sort of like in the musical where they put the baby's bassinet on the hook.
Yeah.
My personal favorite.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut to a commercial from IKEA, and then we're going to let you listen to the trailer for Reefer Madness 1936, and we'll be right back.
Let's play a game. I will ask you yes or no questions. Ready? Do you have a rocking chair to relax on? Do you have space to store your toddler's toys if an unexpected guest came over? Can you lay down comfortably on your couch? If your answer is no to one or more of these questions, then you need the new IKEA catalog. Visit IKEA at Cairo Festival City and get your free copy. Enjoy 1,000 new ideas and more than 2,000 new lower prices. IKEA 2018 catalog. Make room for life.
IKEA.
High school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently, they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe or watch case. In this startling film, you will see dopesters lure children to destruction.
We're going over to Joe's place. Why don't you come along? We have a date to play instead of doubles. Oh, you can play anytime. Come on, we'll have some laughs. Can I go along with you? Sure. Hey, I'll see you at dinner, sis.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Of course, if you're afraid.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide. And the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important film now, before it is too late.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed our 1936 trailer for Reefer Madness. And before we go any further, Vicky is going to give us a brief synopsis of the 1936 film, Reefer Madness.
Yes, one of my personal favorites. Should be doing bong hits and doing this. Okay. Propaganda film that relates the story is told by high school principal Dr. Carroll to parents at a PTA meeting of the scourge of marijuana. The tale revolves around May and Jack, accomplices in the distribution of marijuana, who managed to entice the local high school kids to stop by May's apartment to smoke reefer. The lives of all who are involved with this menace are inevitably shattered, and one man becomes so addicted to the killer weed that the guilt over framing a teen for murder, spoiler alert, causes a judge to order him to be committed for life to a mental hospital. Dr. Carroll closes by advising us not to incur in the same tragedy. Jeez. You know what I got to say about that? I'm doing that hand motion right
now. So, John, do you want to start off as a discussion about the film?
Yeah, I actually seen this, man, it had to be like 6-7 years ago, and then it was actually rewatching it. They try to make it look so serious. Like, it just, it starts out with this,
freaking
professor, we just have to have this conversation and tell you the dangers of marijuana. And it's one of those things that when you watch it, you kind of go, did people really take this seriously? And then I guess when you see certain contexts of when they would do certain things, like for instance, when everyone is actually hanging together in this room and they're dancing and women are sitting on men's laps, I'm thinking to this day, it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But, again, 1936 is, people then seeing this movie where, people are being salacious and doing bad things. It's like they're sitting there clutching their pearls like, oh my God, why is she sitting on his lap? My poor daughter. And they start thinking of their kids, my daughter, the dangers of this drug.
Didn't you guys find it kind of really, when I see these old movies that we've begun watching for the podcast and whatnot, I'm always shocked at the sexual innuendo factor.
Yeah.
For the puritanical, society, moral compass back then, that they actually, incorporated this stuff into their film, because I've been, my jaw's like, oh my God, they're suggesting in homosexuality.
Yeah.
And then there's the sex, if you smoke pot, you're going to have sex with everybody.
Yeah.
They kind of hinted that it makes you a sexual moron if you smoke dope,
Well, see, I don't see smoking. I don't see the sexual deterrent. That sounds like quite fun. It made me want to smoke more. More sex? Yeah.
If you smoke reefer, you're going to have sex with everybody.
with everyone. This is a massive orgy, and that's what it's funny, because during that, in that time, like if that was, you know, they were to try to do something like that now, they would have to go a little bit further. But like then it was like the dancing. Oh, I'm gonna grab you. I'm gonna dance and gyrate on you. You know. Oh, how scandalous! You cannot do that. You know.
Then you get to the musical. It's all out the window.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Dry humping, you know, of the leg.
But I mean, there's such excesses in this film. I mean, the thing is like, and it's so melodramatic. That's quite funny. You're like watching this, and everything's like in high emotion.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, and then, but to contradict the high emotion, you got like these apparent professionals who are giving their professional opinion. You know, like the scientist guy goes, and marijuana can be hidden in women's shoes, in the heel.
Oh, that was that was hysterical. Oh.
It can be hidden anywhere. Oh my God, yeah. It's like that was just giving me great ideas to smuggle drugs every time I go to Mexico. I'm gonna hollow out my shoe.
I just think it's also interesting how the plot points in the movie, and because you're kind of in the beginning, you're kind of where are they going with this? Because they set it up like, you know, this man is telling them this one story of this situation where, you know, everything just, you know, went out of control, and you're watching and you're waiting for like, well, something really bad to happen, and then when it does, it's sort of like a domino effect of everything that happens. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Like, you know, you have the guy starting to smoke pot, you know, marijuana, and then he basically cheats on the girl that he's in love with, you know, and then she almost gets raped, and then it's just like it's like a domino, one thing after another.
That guy crossing the street, my personal favorite. Just mow everybody over down.
Yeah.
1,000, you know. And
he literally, like, that was quick. Like, he had literally just smoked it, and all of a sudden it's like, right, go Speed Racer, go. You know.
I know. Oh my God, that was funny. And they really did over the top.
Well, the character Jimmy, I mean, it's quite interesting because it's like, you know, they show him, and he's like the epitome of apple pie. He's like, you know, he's those kids that you would see like in the, you know, Ozzie and Harriet and things like that. Gee, Dad, hi, Mom, and it was like all so pure and innocent. And as he dredges into the depths of marijuana abuse, it's like he just like gets. It's like, you see the apple pie and the ice cream falling off the kid's complexion.
Serious.
And
they just go to shit. Yeah.
I mean, I have to admit you could tell where the salacious sex was added to make it an exploitation film for the 1930s. It's like, you know, all of a sudden you see, for no apparent reason, it's like a woman's like lifting up her skirt to put on some stockings. You're like,
oh yeah,
the very beginning, yeah.
I see them all the way up. I mean, you don't see that much thigh in any 1930s movie, you know?
I don't know about you, but I was turned on. That showed me the evils.
Yeah.
They weren't showing lots of boobies, though. Here's the boob guy, not the thigh guy. I thought. Not unless it's the whatever du jour of the month for you.
But I have to admit that in this film, even when they were, even when the main character was being degraded further and further and further, I mean, everyone kept well dressed. I mean, they all kept their suits on, and you know, the women all were perfectly coiffed and stuff like that. So
their hair was nice.
Yeah, even Jimmy, when he tousled around with that girl, he was just a little untucked. All he had to do was just like tuck his shirt back in. So he.
I know that wasn't too subtle. What was going on there for a 1936-38 era film?
Well, I mean, I found what was quite startling is that Jimmy and Mary are supposed to be high schoolers. And they looked about 40.
Yeah. I was going to say, you keep forgetting that they're actually like, they're all in high school, you know, or the majority of them are. And then so when it's when Ralph is trying to lure these kids, like, I got some more kids coming, May. Hey, you know, we're going to party today. You know, you're like, they don't look like kids at all. Like they just look like your neighbors. They're like, hey, come on over and have a smoke.
Yeah. They were definitely not teenagers, but they just didn't have really much. I don't know. It was like one of those B movies, you know, like you see with the flying saucer with the string attached to it.
Like Plan 9 from Outer Space, one of those Ed Wood kind of films.
Ed Wood, that's the name I was trying to come up with.
I mean, I have to sit there and say that it is a movie because it's a morality tale that everyone gets their just desserts. I mean, even May, who does good at the end and like, saves Emmy from a lifetime of prison, throws herself out the window.
which by the way, that scene, I still to this day laugh so hard. It's like so bad because it's meant to be so tragic, but she's just like, there's a window, I can break away. And the poor little woman who's like escorting her out, she's just like traumatized for the rest of her life.
Well, she didn't do much to stop her either. She's like off running, and the woman's just standing there going, huh?
Yeah. What is she gonna?
I know. Was she walking her to her cell? I couldn't figure out, or she going to death row and decided to hurdle herself out of the window.
I mean, I think it was insinuated that she was going to go to death row, like she's going to jail and either sentenced for life or whatever, and she just couldn't live with that, so she had to jump out the window.
I took it that basically she jumped out the window because she couldn't stand the guilt of all the deaths around her. That she was a part of it, or
all the kids.
She couldn't live. She couldn't live with it. She couldn't live with the guilty conscience. Though I have to say that if I was going to throw myself out the window or commit suicide, I wouldn't want that woman to be there because she's not going to stop you at all.
No, I know. She's like, well, it like she either appeared to be very bitty, so she was just like, like couldn't grab her, couldn't hold on to her.
They didn't try really hard with the matron or whatever she was that was walking her down the hallway.
Yeah. And then it's funny because then when they look out the window, you just sort of see this like mannequin laying on the ground.
Yeah,
all broken limbs, like disheveled. I mean, I'm surprised she didn't land on anyone. That was my like thing. Like, there's people down there just kind of.
So basically, I mean, if you jumped out your window right now, I guarantee you'd hit at least 10 people
on the way down. Just kidding.
I mean, the sad thing about it, she only jumped one story.
Yeah. And then she's like crawling out to the street.
Story, okay?
She crawled out to the street so that way, what was the guy who was driving the car like could run her over?
Jimmy. Yeah. I mean, we're gonna get to the musical later, but the actress playing May, she went and saw when the musical opened in Los Angeles. She went and saw the musical like 3 or 4 times, and she got to know the writers. And they asked her, they go, when they were filming this film, did they take it seriously? She said no, because we all knew that it's not to be. We didn't take it seriously acting it because unfortunately, she goes, I think it shows that none of the actors in that film take it seriously what they're doing. They said they just did it for high camp.
Yeah,
because all they got, they said that they didn't realize what the film was about or what it was. It was just an acting job for them. So they were cast by this church group to make what they thought was like an educational film. But then when they got the script, said that they go, well, let's throw that out the window. Let's just have fun with this. And that's what they did. So, and I think it does show. I mean, everyone, even like, Jack, who's the drug pusher. And it's quite interesting because everyone around them is using marijuana except for Jack, the drug pusher, which I have to sit there and say that if
that's the smart drug dealer, though.
It's always important not to sample your own product, they say.
Yeah, because you not to get hooked yourself, or you see how people get hooked. The other one was Ralph, too. Ralph was like, he's like the villain,
The guy playing the piano?
Yeah, he's also the one that was like lurking, and he was like looking at the young things and going, "Oh, I'm gonna give me a piece of that young thing."
Resident pervert.
Yeah.
Well, the worst thing about it is like he's got a joint hanging out of his mouth. He's like going, and the other guy's sitting there going, "Faster, faster!"
Yeah.
And because he's high,
oh my god!
He song as fast as he wanted him to.
He started getting the dark things under his eye where he started to look more insane.
Yeah.
Get some more reefer, man. I've got to have me some more reefers. Like,
he looked a little Nosferatu at times. He was all,
everybody took that shit seriously back then. It really did give weed a bad name. God.
Oh, yeah.
They were doing that. It's going to make you lazy bum right up until the 80s. I remember when the commercials came out for the Just Say No campaign, Yeah. You're going to be like this. This is your brain on, whatever.
This is your brain on drugs.
And a fried egg. And it's probably with people who have probably done more drugs in their whole lives than we'll ever see. Johnny Depp did one.
Yeah.
Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't know that Pee Wee Herman took drugs at all. I bet you when he made the Corsican Brothers with Cheech and Chong, but there was no drugs on the set whatsoever.
But I mean, overall,
he got in trouble for being in a theater or something, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of one of those things. It was like a big hoo-ha for nothing. It wasn't like touching anybody. He was just touching himself. In a porn theater, which I assumed, that's the etiquette protocol, isn't it? If you go to a porn theater, that you should touch yourself.
Well, he got caught whacking off. I thought it wasn't like it was Walt Disney, I guess, so it's okay.
Well, he did have the leading children's show at the time, so that's probably
That's true.
Well, and the thing was, they got associated with, is he a pedophile? And it went from a whole other direction. It was like, no, he was just in a theater wanking
Did you
his
see
crank.
the mugshot? They had that mugshot of him. Where his hair was, oh my God! Talk about the worst mugshot. They had to exploit that, though. I'm sorry, I digress. Pee Wee Herman.
Well, it probably led to him being cast as Penguin's father in Batman Returns.
Yeah, and which is a little known fact too, in the show Gotham, he's also Penguin's father.
Mm-hmm.
Penguin's father.
Mm-hmm. Penguin's father.
I forgot about that.
So
we're getting old. Oh my God, I can remember these things in the span of decades now.
I just wondered, like, in my mind, like, where would they go with if they ever decided to do a sequel? And at that time, who would they follow at that point?
I don't know. They could probably pick up to where, the next couple moves into the apartment. And they're getting young kids hooked on marijuana, because that should have been with an illicit. What is it? I've actually, in my lifetime encounter, I've never met anybody addicted to marijuana. But I can honestly say I've known one person at least that really has to have it, or they freaked out if they didn't have it.
Yeah.
I'm not, married to that person anymore. But I mean, seriously, some people just actually Jones, and I don't know where they got it for this movie back in the 30s, but I mean, when they say it's worse than heroin, cocaine, meth, or like. Boy, they really had it in for it then.
Oh yeah, I think that especially when you vilify something and people charge, a religious group to like go after it, they're gonna go full force, Bible belt and all, and throw it into it,
You don't even hear too much about that, about pot down here. I mean, everybody's trying to legalize it. I mean, got Colorado here, California here. I don't know anybody who doesn't get edibles, just here, you want some.
I think it's also because it's becoming harder to police and control. So it's sort of like with alcohol, eventually it's like, well, why are we going to spend so much effort and time in trying to do this?
What bothers me about that, I know that that would be a great tax to levy on people to, use it legally. But now you got Monsanto sitting out there with their greedy little hands, But they already got, what do you call it? Seeds that they've already compromised, just waiting.
Yeah.
To get in on it. And who wants to smoke their shit,
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing about Reefer Madness, the 1936 film, is that it helped start New Line Cinema, which was Robert Shea's company. He bought the film for very cheap and started showing it around in the 70s, which eventually led to actually helping finance Nightmare on Elm Street for New Line.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it made him one of the,
6 Degrees of Reefer.
Yeah, 6 Degrees of Reefer.
6 Degrees of Reefer.
I mean, it did very well on the New Line's college circuit, as we were saying in the 80s and late 70s, early 80s. And then, in 2004, they did release a colorized version of it. And what they did was every time they smoked, depending on the person's personality, they would have a different colored smoke coming out of each character. And apparently,
interesting.
A chance to see this, the colorized. They do flash 420 in different colors as a subliminal message through it. But if you do get a chance to see it, the only thing critics said that they really loved it, but they said it was more for LSD than it was for marijuana, because marijuana doesn't give you that trippy effect that this film now gives you with this new colorized 2004.
I saw the colorized version, but I thought, and I was like, I wasn't going to watch it because I don't like colorized movies. I like watching the old silver screenway, the high HD quad. But now that you told me, I'm going to have to watch it now.
The techno color.
The techno thing.
Take some marijuana and LSD so you get the full effect of the colorized Reefer.
We'll have to go get some 4-way window pane and watch the colorized window pane.
So basically what we're going to do is we're going to now take a short commercial break from IKEA, and then we're going to give you the film trailer because our next film we're discussing is Reefer Madness The Musical.
Amazon is here to make your life easier. By just the tap of a button, you can turn the camera on your phone to your own personal shopping list. Introducing Flow. Just tap the camera icon onto the search bar, and you can find whatever it is you're looking for, right on Amazon. Faster than scanning a barcode and typing the name of your item into the search engine. Besides, searching with words is so 2012. Save time and money. Amazon, where shopping meets effortless.
You have been convicted and sentenced to death by electrocution. Any last words? Well put. Pull the switch.
In 1936, a madness swept the teenage world. An evil so insidious, so seductive, that even its name, marijuana, struck fear into the hearts of the citizenry.
Public enemy number one.
Forsooth, fair Juliet.
Are you trying to woo me?
Now, two young sweethearts, Mary Lane and Jimmy Harper,
Hey kid, I'm Jack.
will be caught up in the path of the evil demon weed.
This isn't that reefer I've read about.
All the rage in Paris.
Paris?
And drawn into a seamy world filled with decadence,
What a night. I was in more laps than a napkin.
corruption,
Are you putting on weight?
Lately, I seem to be hungry all the time.
good girls gone bad,
Tonight you and me are gonna break out like the measles.
and some very rude behavior.
Shut up, bitch!
I feel a little naughty. We'll play with whips and nipple clips and candle wax.
Jack, I saw Satan.
Most wound up like an 8-day clock. One too many giggle sticks.
You better put your flaps down before you take off.
That was your tongue! Wait till that Susie Mayberry hears about this.
Kristen Bell, Christian Campbell, Neve Campbell, Ellen Cummings, Anna Gasteyer, John Gasteyer, Amy Spanger, Robert Torti, and Stephen Weber in the outrageous new feel-good musical comedy of the year, Reefer Madness.
Save the country! Madness, Reefer Madness, crazy
Only on Showtime.
Welcome back. We're now going to be discussing Reefer Madness, the musical, the 2004, which is basically based on a Los Angeles musical that came out in 1998. It then transferred to Broadway, but unfortunately it opened 4 days after 9/11, which most theater shows struggle to be able to succeed due to people's not wanting to go to New York City after the main tragedy of that fateful day. Since that time, the film has won numerous awards. It has reopened, has gone on several tours, won several awards. And basically the story of Reefer Madness, the musical, is a story of a man who comes to town, a bit like the Music Man, and just talks to the parents in this school about the evils of marijuana. Then what we have is a film within a film, and we listen to a story about two young high school students who fall into the prey of marijuana and the consequences that they portray. So, John, do you want to start out discussing what you thought of Reefer Madness, the musical?
Sure. So, very different movie from the original. So, first of all, Kristen Bell, who plays Mary, and Christian Campbell, who plays Jimmy, are excellent in this, and it's the epitome of the sweetness of that time, of the golly gee George, it's just the movie itself is just full of an amazing cast like that. Alan Cummings plays the lecturer who pulls you through the story through such a whimsical narration, and he takes the original movie and just really, you think in itself it pokes fun at itself, but the musical actually just takes it to a whole other level. And again, like I said, all the cast that's in it, everyone who's in it, Neve Campbell's in it, Stephen Weber's in it. It's such a fun movie. It's such a fun musical. There are songs that will stick in your head. The stuff is stuck in my head now. day after day. I keep repeating it in my head.
I have to say it's one of those things that has so many throwaway lines that are so funny. I mean, it opens up with Jimmy basically going across the road, and Kristen Bell is Mary screaming with her girlfriends, and he runs over and he picks up a turtle and he goes, "Oh, it's just a turtle," and then he puts it back down, and then Kristen Bell goes, "Oh, I thought it was rats."
Yeah. So good.
And one of my favorite lines is by Amy Spanger, who's basically known in New York City as, she's a Broadway actress. She did like Rock of Ages is what she starred in on Broadway, and The Wedding Singer, the musical for that.
Right.
But when she's one of her basic lines is like, I was in more laps than a napkin.
There were some good one-liners. It was an excellent movie. I really strong. It's funny as hell.
My hats go off to Anna Gasteyer. I mean, her facial expressions are just out of this world. I mean,
poker face.
Watching her.
When she did the very noir thing very good, like the like this the flipping of the hair back, and and that's what I say with each of the characters. They gave them sort of this nuance. So like hers is obviously like the battered wife or girlfriend, and how she just kind of puts up with it, and how that just it goes until the very end. And like we said earlier, spoilers, like she finally fights back, and it's just it's such an interesting film to be able to kind of portray the dinginess of Kristen Bell's character Mary. Like she just is so sweetingly like naive and just so naive, and they were able to kind of give each character this sort of nuance, as Sally, Sally just couldn't catch her footing. She was always running into things and slamming into things and forgetting her baby. I mean,
I know, especially when she put it on the stove.
Yeah. Or when they're just kind of like, wait, I don't hear the baby. What did you do to the baby? And she's like, nothing. And then you find out she like sold the baby in the black market. I mean, it just,
to buy marijuana.
Yeah. Did you sell your baby to buy marijuana?
Yeah.
What I also like about this whole thing is that about the musical, it actually shows like how the government frauds its citizens, and you got this thread going through everything. Simple fact that when one guy we got Alan Cummings talking to the school, and those scenes are done in black and white, which are quite well done. And, this guy goes, well, I think you're, blowing this out of proportion. He goes, I heard about the heroin, and that, my sister's brother was hooked on that, and that's far worse than marijuana. And then, then he, him standing as, Alan Cummings standing as like the government official. So it goes, so that's a Russian name, isn't it? And yielding him and like going, yeah, okay, well, maybe it was the marijuana, and then sitting down, or the thing. But then they would like throw this other stuff at you. It's like, Chinese people eat babies, like, and
that one woman like sinks down.
This Asian woman's like, oh, Jesus.
About that guy that cannibalized, one of the stars of the show. He just started eating her, and she was in pieces, and their head's like here, and he throws the head. If you smoke marijuana, you're going to get horrendous munchies. And she didn't get back in time with the takeout, so they ate her friend,
Well, then I think one of the other ones, like you're talking about, Keith, the lines, like when they're in the hall and the woman's standing there and she's like, marry a Jew. Like, it just, like, some of the underlying racism of the time, I was like, oh, my God.
I thought it was...
She's like, how do you pronounce this?
Yeah. Mary Lane, Mary Jane.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just so many nuances, and they've done really well. I mean, they named the high school that Jimmy and Mary goes is Harry Aslinger, which we mentioned earlier, was one of the reasons why marijuana is made illegal today. And then there's the 420 reference in the house is 420. They mention that a lot.
Yeah.
And with 420 was code word for drugs at that time. Yeah. So, but I mean, when they put this musical together, I mean, they really knew what they were doing. I would love to see this on stage. It would be so much fun, especially if it's as gory as the movie is. I mean, there's some gory bits that you're going, what the hell?
Well, there's the goriness of it, but then there's also, it's coupled with the whole, like, almost like Jesus Christ Superstar moment.
Oh my God. Just the total, the irreverence. The Christians must really love this movie.
Oh yeah.
Jesus Christ parts, I was like rolling. I mean, that was just great.
And who knew that Jesus was like a cabaret singer? I mean, that makes so much sense.
Oh my God, it was hysterical.
But even like with even with like the lyrics, I mean, even all the lyrics in each of the songs mean something. They all have like these wonderful throwaway lines, like listen to Jesus, Jimmy, say no to the marijuana. And then he goes, then he says, I'm the face on the, wow, sorry. I'm the face on the shroud of Turin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like all these little like lines all the way through. And he's like, did he just say that?
Yeah. Yeah, there was. I mean, I'm gonna have to probably watch it another couple times because it was so funny. And plus, there's things you miss probably on the first, watching of it, and you just like, well, why didn't I catch that before? But I mean, it just totally, over your head if you don't know what you're looking for. But I mean, it's hysterical. I mean, talk about taking artistic license, original,
Yeah.
I mean, my hat's off to Kristen Campbell. I mean, he really captured that whole, wide-eyed 1930s,
bizarre
American Pie guy. And then when he goes to evil, just the facial expressions that he would use. And then when you get, when his life starts going to more debauch, just everything about him, he just delivered that. And Kristen Bell, I mean, she, when she gets stoned and her eyes are crossing.
Yeah. Again, that was one of my favorite scenes because in the movie, it's in the original, 1936 movie, it's this moment where you realize, she's actually being raped by this guy. In this, they completely flip it, and it's actually, Kristen Bell is actually becoming the dominatrix because of pot, and she's basically like, take it, bitch. Like it just.
But even like when they get stoned and they go to the sexual debauchery of it all, and you got Jimmy like humping,
dry humping the leg,
and the banister, and the
yeah, it's like.
I wonder how many times they had to do that. The outtakes. I mean, with him dry humping her leg. I mean, that was just hysterical.
But then they had Kristen Bell do the same thing, which is hysterical because then she was like humping everything too. It was like so good.
I know. Talk about I mean, they totally they slammed the the 1936 propaganda, and it looked like they were after today's propaganda a little bit as well. So
yeah, I mean, if you
for everybody who likes Reefer.
I mean, if you look at today, especially like the whole thing about fake news and whatnot, and the way that the government and newspapers twist things and everything like that.
Right.
I mean, you got to remember the stage show came out in 1998. The musical, the film done by Showtime came out in 2004. It's actually become more relevant.
Yeah.
Here we are, 13 years
exactly.
later, 14 years later now, and the film's actually more relevant today than it was in 2004, or when the Broadway show came out.
Exactly, I agree.
I mean, I think also where this does really well is that they actually cast people who could sing. I mean, Kristen Bell was in the Off Broadway production of it, so it wasn't Kristen Campbell's been in it since day one. The guy who played Jesus, Robert Torti, he played the Steven Weber part, and he would.
I loved him.
Several
I thought he
roles
was
as well.
fantastic. He was fantastic.
If you have not seen, Kristen Bell did a little video. It's Mary Poppins Quits, and it's hysterical. It's on Funny or Die, but
I'll look it up.
Yeah, you have to look it up because it's this like the sweetness of it, but it's like Mary Poppins has had enough, and it's really good.
I'll have to look for it now.
I mean, Kristen Bell she's one of these people who are really coming into her own. I mean, she did Veronica Mars, as we know, and that's probably what she's most famous for.
Right.
But I mean, the thing is, she was in one of the biggest animated features of all times, which is Frozen.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
She did that as well. And I just said, I did watch. I mean, I watched her last week in Bad Moms Christmas, which is quite funny.
Yeah, actually, the Bad Mom movies are amazing because and I just now realize Anna's in that as well. So, Anna, her character as a mom is very different from Kristen Bell's character. But yeah, I mean, and Kristen Bell has also The Good Place, which is on NBC, which is absolutely hysterical. My friend had me watch a couple episodes, and I was just laughing hysterically. It's so good.
I'm still trying to. Yeah, I thought that I was watching her, and I didn't realize that she did the voice for Frozen.
Yeah, she was Anna.
Yeah, what a fantastic voice she has. Well, she could handle the comedic stuff too, And
Yeah,
really is quite, diverse.
Well, she's also just really good at being quirky, and that's not sometimes easy to do because it can come across as being a little contrived sometimes. So she's really, even in this, like just her quirkiness, because like when she walks in and he's basically like, taking a toke, and she's just so clueless, and she's good, it's hysterical because most people, you'd be like
the epitome of the dumb blonde with such vigilance. Yeah.
But the thing is, she can sell her character, which I mean, like in this, as in that one scene you're talking about, and then he reaches over and like sticks his tongue in her mouth, like, "Oh, Jimmy, was that your tongue?"
I know.
Yeah.
Your tongue in my mouth. It's just like, holy cow, that's the worst thing somebody does these days. I'll be blessed. And
I do think that the parts of Jimmy and Mary and anyone else who have actually been able to tackle this, I mean, you can go to a point where you actually don't feel for any of these two because, I mean, it's so broad, the way it's written, but they actually deliver it and are spot on every single time, I mean, when Mary gets shot, and
I think I'm shot.
I think I'm shot. Yeah, again.
and they do that West Side Story, in most musicals, it's like if you're gonna die, you have to do like some kind of reprise of one song that you've done before.
Right.
Romeo and Juliet. Oh my gosh.
And then she goes, I'm hemorrhaging blood. But it's like she just sells it. But you feel really sorry for her at the same time. It's like weird. So
when is she gonna die kind of thing.
I love that they actually that one of their first songs together is a whole Romeo and Juliet, and they want to be like them, and you're just inside. I was laughing so hard because it was like what happens to Romeo and Juliet, but they're so naive. They're just like, we want to be like Romeo and it's like
and we'll have lots of babies.
We'll
be together again.
And I love like when she's dying, she brings this back. She's just like, so how did it end? And they're all like, oh, like just don't tell her. Just let it go, let it be.
And then there was the school ring thing that was going on underlying all of that.
Yeah.
Was it Jack steals the school ring?
What'd she say? What'd she call it? Your chubby finger?
Yeah, your chubby fingers.
I mean, there's some classic lines, you're sweeter than Shirley Temple dipped in pudding, or softer than a pillow full of bunnies. Oh, I love bunnies.
Yeah. They did really good on that, the choreography, the scripting.
But I also liked, at the same time, they actually do refer back to the original 1936. I mean, you got like the piano playing. I mean, you have Amy Spanger's character doing the piano thing really quickly.
Right.
And then you have like the car accident where, he hits somebody, but it's like he's so far away from the car. And he's like,
I know. Yeah. And I love how like that's a scene where they're all like it's like what they call the overture, where they're all singing the song and it's different pieces of the song, and then it cuts back to like the policeman and the guy who just got ran over, and they're like singing with everyone. I was like, oh god.
I'd also like it's like as Jimmy goes into his debauchery and he gets more and more addicted to the marijuana, and then he gets in the shower with his mom and he just turns around and
I know.
I know, she's like appalled, and he's like here's the loofah, Mom.
I forgot about that. That was hysterical.
But to give the kudos to Kristen Campbell, the thing is, like, he's stands up very, very straight when he's before the marijuana. But then he turns into like this Igor character, where his body starts slumping over to the side, and
the dark circles and disheveled hair. It
reminds you of Marty Feldman in and
Young Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein, where his hump gets switching one side to the other.
It's like he kind of morphs into Ralph, because even that scene where he's sitting on the couch and they're both like, like, dude, you're just like, oh my God, it's so much. And then remember when he's trying to actually go sober and he's like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Would you like a brownie?
Oh yeah,
I love brownies. So good.
But even the animation was really well. And one of my favorite scenes is when they turn Jimmy into marijuana. And it's like, suck it down for Sally. Take it down.
Yeah.
And they like mention,
Sally.
I just thought, this is. I mean, the thing is, basically what happened was I was watching this. Most of my stuff comes from America as far as my DVDs and Blu-rays. And basically how I came across this was I was watching a horror film, and this was a trailer on there, and I was like, okay, I'll go buy that copy. So I sent for a copy of it, and I got it, and I thought, okay, I came home from work, I got it. It's like, okay, I'll watch this, got nothing else to do, and I just fell in love with it. And I have to sit there and say, for like 2 years, anytime someone came over, I made them watch this film.
The musical.
Yeah.
No, I told my friends, I said, one night we're gonna watch this, because I said it was so good, and they've never even seen the original, so I want to show them both, but I feel like that could be a little bit too much for someone to, in one sitting. So,
well, just ask them, like, just get it on, YouTube, and just sit there, just briefly go through it, get the main idea, because you really got to watch the old one to appreciate the musical.
Yeah,
because
to get the context of it.
Funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I was like going, oh man, they made a musical out of a 1936 whatever. And I mean, I couldn't stop laughing. I mean, I laughed at the whole thing, and just like the innuendo and everything else that come with it. It was
terrible. I mean, I also sit there and say that with the big finale with May saves Jimmy with the help of FDR, of course.
Oh, I know.
He basically mentions Annie, which I thought was quite clever. I thought she was talking out her ass, sort of thing. But the sun's gonna shine tomorrow. I didn't think she knew what she was talking about. But then when you have this song called, you got to have truth, and some of the lyrics are just fantastic. I mean, there are like some really weird things in there, like we're taking down the fingerprints of jazz musicians and immigrants, and about turning your neighbors in and all this other stuff, and you just look at this and it's like, this is pretty much what's happening today with
yes, especially with it. They make it so down here in some of the Texas schools, they want you to think on your parents if they think you're doing anything.
Yeah.
They even got a whole repertoire where they question children to make, and you might not even be doing anything.
But I mean, some of the lyrics in there is like, to the things that scare us are burned and banned or smashed to smithereens. And once the Reefer has been destroyed, we'll start on Darwin and Sigmund Freud. And sex depicted on celluloid, and communists and queens, when danger's near, exploit their fears. The end will justify the means. And you're like, God, this is true. It's pretty much what's happening now. It's just kind of like, what you do is you get. Well, I mean, I think it was Nychek that said that if you keep a nation in fear, you can control them. And, and I find nowadays, like when you read the newspaper, and I don't care what, who you voted for and what side you are as far as presidential and all that other stuff.
Who cares anymore?
But for the last 10 years, it's always been about exploiting everyone's fears. The same thing with there's a pedophile in every single corner. Can't let your children go out to play. And now they started on Facebook. That Facebook is harming people. You need to be protected, and social media. And it just keeps going. And we come to the point where, we don't want you to accept responsibility. We want you to blame something. If a kid, the first thing, they do now, they, you could take computer games, for instance. If a kid shoots up a high school or something like this, what computer games?
Video games.
Yeah. Which is also coming back into, now they're really trying to go after regulating that again. I'm like, can they just leave it alone, please?
I mean, my son, when Justin was here, he used to play video games. And the worst thing that came out of the video games was the stench of 3 boys sitting in a room for 3 days and not playing Call of Duty. I mean, it totally smelled like ass, as you figure. But these boys grew up to be nice kids, and they didn't want to go shoot up any schools,
Yeah. I think what they do, the thing is it's not taking accountability. It's always blaming something else for the ills of whatever. And anytime someone goes wrong, whether it's murder or a kid gets bad grades, something like that, instead of taking the kid and taking accountability or looking at what's going on in his home life, they're always looking for some external source because it's easier. Because the thing is that if you want, basically if you want to demonize something, you got to make sure that you publicly demonize something that everyone can associate with.
Yeah.
If you sit there and go, okay, Joe Smo over here basically, shot down 5 or 6 people at an airport because, he was just personally messed up and he just woke up one day and he's just psychologically deranged. And everyone's like, oh, that's sad. And they move on with their daily lives. But if you go, he did this because he watched, horror films. And everyone's like, oh my God, the evil of horror films.
Horror films. Oh my God, he did that.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's like, it kind of makes it okay sort of thing. I mean, we kind of discussed this a little bit with the bad seed sort of thing.
Right.
And basically it's, the simple fact that, if you can associate that, oh my God, this can happen to my kids or this can happen in my life, as in Reefer Madness, which is movie shows off, then oh my God, it's personal to me, so therefore we have to get on the bandwagon, we have to fight the evils of the world. But at the same time all this stuff is going on, there are far more evil things going on in the world that they don't want you to know about, so it's better to see what I'm going to show you the right hand, but God forbid don't look at what the left hand's doing.
Exactly.
And I say the musical really, really perpetrates that all the way through. And, anytime that you speak up against anything, the first thing they do is, in America, or even in here at the moment, we have the whole big Russian scare at the moment, which is God knows who's behind this. But, the government here has already made Russia guilty. So, guilty by what they think. But, at the same time now, it's going to get to a point where it's going to be like, what's your last name? Oh, well, that sounds Russian. So, if you speak out against anything, the first thing they do is they look at your character and try to find something they can pinpoint so they can demonize you so that way they can keep going forward with their point.
Yeah, it's easy to vilify anyone and anything and sort of amplify that. And now it's easy to spread that message, whereas before it was the Pony Express, right? You had to you had to do it at a very hard approach. Now it's like you can just blast anything out. And that's what this movie, like you said, kind of perpetuates is the dangers of marijuana and and then it amplifies that by the actions that people have. And in the original, pretty much everyone, does it, gets paid for the price that they had to, in order to use marijuana, they were punished for it. Right. Versus the musical there is a redeeming quality in some of the characters. And even, Kristen Bell comes back, she's resurrected literally. Right. So it's literally one of these things where it's like how, it's okay. And we've learned our lesson now,
Well, let's take May, for instance. May butchers Jack. Literally butchers. She's singing her song and she's hacking away at him and she's getting blood splattered all over her.
Yeah.
He goes and saves Jimmy. She's still covered in blood, but she's not going to jail for the murder because she saved Jimmy. So, she was redeemed.
Yeah.
She got rid of the drug pusher, but at the same time, she saved an innocent boy's life.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I have to say, as far as the musical is concerned, I think, to be honest, I never really watched the 1936 film until after I've seen the musical. And I think you can appreciate the musical on a lot of levels because, yes, there's a lot of things that nod to the 1936, but at the same time, it does stand on its own. And I've showed it to lots of people who've never seen the 1936 film, and they really, really enjoyed it. So I think it does stand alone. I think the 1936 film helps make you appreciate the film even more, but I still think you can appreciate the musical on its own. So, Vicky, what are your final thoughts of Reefer Madness the Musical?
I thought it was hysterical. I thought it was well done. Like I said, you guys always throw these movies at me and stuff I think I might not like. But it was really a bunch of talented cast, funny, just hysterical. You have to watch. I suggest watching the 1936 black and white before you watch the musicals. It will give you more of appreciation of it because if you want to laugh, it's definitely an in-your-face kind of, if you're like me and you like weed in your face kind of movie. So we're not all crazy, and we're not trying to kill people or dismember our families or whatever.
Speak for yourself.
Well, yeah, thank you. I keep forgetting your poor middle child sister, Kelly. She had to grow up with you. Hi, Kelly, again. Got to mention you every podcast, you know.
Well, I was
Anyway,
say,
no,
my sister Kelly
well done.
basically lives in a marijuana den, so.
She's the middle child. Again, hi, Kelly.
She's got a lush garden in the back.
Watertown. It's still under snow. It's still snowing up there.
I know.
Forget that nonsense.
I mean, I think we do have to look at, though marijuana is now becoming more legalized, and I think people are becoming more intelligent about marijuana. It does have some downfalls as far as, if you're bipolar or something like that, it can have some adverse effects for a very, very small population. But, the biggest drug threat actually is not heroin or meth or anything like that. It's actually prescribed drugs from your GP. Right. That's the biggest fear. Yeah. I mean, your biggest drug pusher is the person that you're paying to help make you well. So
yeah,
I know so many people who are addicted to Xanax and sleeping pills and all that sort of stuff. And, we're talking about some of them have been on it for like 20, 30 years.
You can't get it over here anymore. No one
I think
prescribe anything.
To me, the biggest addiction problem here, especially in our country, because we kind of perpetuate it in other countries, is food. Like some like soda and sugar, and it's
we're a very
sole
unhealthy
problem.
Nation. We're an extremely unhealthy nation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look at marijuana use in itself, I mean, someone goes, "Oh, they took marijuana and they got violent." It's like, did they really? Because I know everyone I know who. I mean, I no longer smoke marijuana at all. But I used to. I mean, I'll be honest with our listeners. I probably spent a good 20, 25 years heavily from the age of 13 up, till I hit 30, quite heavily in tuned with it. And I had a lot of friends who did as well. And I really can't see any of them becoming violent on marijuana because mainly they just get stoned and just sat back and either said something really stupid or couldn't move.
Yeah. Or eats everything in the house. That was my biggest problem. Whenever I did smoke, it was like one of those where, same thing, I don't smoke anymore, but it's like whenever I did smoke, it was one of those where everything in my house would be empty. Like literally, I would just empty it out, and then the next day be like, oh God, what did I eat?
Hot fudge sundae, ham sandwich.
Yeah, everything.
Well, sometimes you would even have meals that shouldn't go together, but in your mind they went well together.
Yeah,
just tasted good at the time.
Pickles and peanut butter.
Yeah, yeah.
I can still attest to it.
So, what about yourself, John? What are your thoughts? Your final thoughts on?
I actually love the musical. Like I said, I saw the original many years ago and rewatched it again. I agree with Vicky that you should probably watch the original before seeing the musical. It gives good context. But I love that they could take something that, someone tried to make a very serious subject and really just make fun of the hell out of it and just say, stop. And it also paints a picture of that time where there was such a fake sweetness of that culture, of American culture. It was like, golly, swell. Jinkies, it was like
Jinkies. And
heaven forbid you break from the norm of things, because I think that was the bigger underlying message that everyone had to follow the footsteps of and if you deviated from that, you're being lured by Satan, and we gotta bring you back into the correct, fold of life, So, but I definitely think it's a worthy film to watch. Like I said, I love.
How can we forget Satan in the musical? Okay.
Oh yeah,
Satan's probably underrated character. Before we go, I love Satan.
Yeah.
I mean, my final thoughts on Reefer Madness the Musical. I have to say that it's enjoyable, but it's also very, very thought provoking. I like what it suggests. It takes a really bad propaganda film from the 1936 and honors it, and it doesn't merely just poke fun of it. It actually gives it a bit of honor and makes you appreciate it to a certain extent. And I find that I learned a lot watching this film, surprisingly enough, through the laughter, through the performances and stuff like this. And then every time I watch it, I do pick up more and more. And I sit there and say, I think this is one of those films that should be experienced a lot more than what it is. I mean, I should add that Reefer Madness, the musical, is available on Amazon Prime, so you can actually go and rent it or and download it through Amazon. And you can also buy a copy of the DVD. If you buy the copy of the DVD of Amazon, you also get the original movie and a very good documentary about how they made marijuana illegal, which is quite interesting. But overall, I would sit there and say that, you know, Reefer Madness in 1936, available on YouTube. And the musical, I sit there and say that, you know, you can experience these films and have a lot of good time, stoned or sober. So they works in two different capacities.
Yes, it does. Trust me, it does.
So make sure to head on over to our website at LL Podcast to find all of our social and podcast platforms, as well as check out our past episodes, become a patron, and read our reviews of books to screens and everything in between. Also, make sure to tune in to our next podcast where we will be covering the book The Circus of Dr. Lao by Charles Finney, as well as the movie The Seven Faces of Dr. Lao. Everyone, you are so swell as friends to our podcast. Thank you for being literary licensed listeners.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, campers. Catch you later.
And